Hi everyone, it's Manda here and welcome to Yachting International Radio today. I'm extremely happy to introduce you to one of my closest friends and an amazing sailor, someone I've done lots of racing with, and also my go-to for anything to do with fitness, Em from Biospheric Performance. So welcome Emma Westmacott to the show. But why don't you introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, and Man, thanks so much for having me on and being interested in my journey, I guess. A little bit about myself. I grew up in the middle of England, and I guess if I look back at my upbringing, I fought convention. I didn't want to go down the normal road of university, although I did end up going to art college, which was a passion, and I very much was about making life out of following passions, following things that you love to do, and I guess I kind of hoped or thought that it would all work out in the end. I left art college and went off to the Caribbean, doing some deliveries on boats. Actually, that's not true. I went out to Australia first in a year traveling around, and got into racing and got my yacht masters out there. I was like 20, 21, something like that. And then I came back to the UK and taught sailing here, and then got involved in deliveries with SunSail across to the Caribbean, and got my first job on a boat, running a boat with a boyfriend. And then life just sort of steamrolled, I guess. Got experience up, did as much racing as I could, and then ended up running my own boat, and decided that was not quite where my heart was, that I was into the performance side of sailing. And so at the time, Heineken was being put together for the Volvo, or it was the Whitbread then. And so I spoke to the crew on that, tried to get involved, but I was still quite young and I wasn't really in the right place. As in, I was out in the Caribbean, I really needed to be around where those guys were doing their training. So I tried to turn stones over, and I guess from that stage I worked towards how I was going to get involved in the high performance racing. And I suppose running my own boat, I learned the skills of maintaining engines, servicing winches, splicing, rigging. So those all became good attributes to offer a around the world racing team. And I've also been conscious along the journey to have other skills. So my interest in health and fitness, and how we, especially, and I suppose it started as female sailors, because how are we competing against the men? You know, they're bigger than us, they're stronger than us, they've got more experience, but we can only work on the things we can work on, which is getting our own skill sets up and getting our own health and fitness strong, so we have something to offer. But my feeling was we needed to become sort of injury proof Amazonian women that could really you know, not only push the boat but push ourselves, because we were up against it on a size factor if we wanted to race competitively against the guys. And so got involved in training teams, and I've moved subsequently to not so much racing and much more of the personal training, and then into biomechanics coaching, which is crossing the gap between physio and exercise, and avoiding injury, reducing pain and discomfort, and improving performance through correct alignment in your body. So that's it in a nutshell.
That's amazing. So I want to come back to the alignment in the body, because I remember when I know you've been on the fitness journey for a long time, but I remember when you started getting into the biospheric performance and becoming obsessed with people's footwear and flip-flops in the bar and standing behind people and seeing, you know, the very incredible slants and wear on shoes that us yachties seem to have, because we spend our lives in unconventional footwear, really, and you can see that it, you know, pays a price on our bodies, I think. However, first of all, I'd like to ask you a little bit about your sailing journey earlier on. What was your first big event in high performance sailing?
The first racing I did was on a Swan 46, and I was trimming spinnakers and jibs. And I followed that circuit all the while I was still working on the cruising boat that I was working on. And I guess I kind of figured, you know, one comes to a crossroads in any sport where you've got to make a decision. Do you want to go into the professional side of the racing or the competition, or do you want to carry on dabbling where you've got the security of a full-time employment, as it were, and you're taking your holidays off doing the racing? And my desire to, I really did have, I had some goals I set early on, and I kind of was like, you know, I guess at the time I didn't think of them as goals, but looking back, that's what they were. But I was kind of, wouldn't it be cool to sail around the bottom points of the world? And wouldn't it be cool to go across the equator and to go through the two canals? So I have actually achieved all of the things that I set out to do as a 20-year-old. So that's cool. But at the time, you know, you just sort of blasé put those thoughts across your head. And I got through the Swan that I raced on. Adrian Carlin, who is a good friend of mine now, she had put together a campaign called Yacht Racing, and this was sponsored by Al McPherson, and it was painted up to look like a Coke can, a Pepsi can, because they were trying to attract Coca-Cola as a sponsor. And the idea was to put an all-female Australian team into the Whitbread. And it was the same race as EF Education and the EF campaign. So it would have been great. There would have been 2 female teams in that race. It didn't actually come to fruition due to various reasons, money being the main one. But yeah, we got the team together, and I got introduced to Adrian by the owner of the Swan that I had been racing on. And I think that's, you know, opportunity in those days was right place, right time, as it always is, but it was also putting yourself out there. You know, I was walking the docks, chatting to people in the bars. I was so driven and keen. You know, I'm trying to encourage a couple of younger girls now into the racing scene, and that's, you know, it comes from the heart. It's skill sets and what have you at the top level of a sport is pretty similar. It's how much your desire is to get involved and do it. And really it's putting, you know, I put myself out there. I was always wanting to go if there were boats training. The 50-footers were in Rhode Island, where I was based at the time, and I was always hanging around their containers and trying to get out and do, you know, to go and see what it was like on these boats. I kind of, yeah, I just really wanted to be involved in that scene.
That's so cool. And then that led on to Maiden?
No, do you know, I was too young for Maiden.
Right.
So I was still kind of at school with that. So I did the Yacht Racing. We got down to Australia, and that campaign stopped because of money and what have you. And I flew back up to Europe to join Tracy with Royal SunAlliance, which was the non-stop Jules Verne, the non-stop round the record attempt, which was on the old Enza of New Zealand. You know, I remember walking down the dock to look at that boat, and literally my heart was in my mouth. I was like, oh my God. I mean, the mast was at an angle like this. I'd never set foot on anything like that before. And to be honest with you, only 10 guys had sailed that thing around the world, and not many men at that time had sailed on those kind of boats. So it was pretty daunting. And, you know, there was Ed Danby, who had sailed on the boats during the challenge. And I didn't know Ed. I didn't know Ed. I didn't know Ed. I didn't know many of the guys, because I'd actually been living in Australia at the time, and I'd come back over. So yeah, because after the Yacht Racing, I stayed in Australia and did some small boat racing around there. So then I came back for Royal SunAlliance, and at the same time EF was putting its campaign together, and so I got invited to do a couple of legs on that. I didn't do the whole race because I was committed to the Jules Verne, but in some of our standby time I went down to join them. And actually through that time I went through the Southern Ocean 3 times, I think, in the space of 2 years, which was quite a novelty at the time, because I'd done the Yacht Racing, I'd done the Royal SunAlliance, and then I did the EF through the Southern Ocean too. And then we came back and we did the Jules Verne challenge with Royal SunAlliance, which unfortunately we didn't break the record because we had the mast came down in the Southern Ocean. We hit a wave wrong and we had a bit of gear failure on one of the running backstays, and the mast came down. Yeah, and then after that, I was quite, you put a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of emotion into these challenges, and you're quite the underdogs as a female team, and I do remember not only were we battling, preparing the boat, our own feelings of limitation through our own experience, but we're also battling conventional thinking and what people out there are judging us by and what the general consensus of the yachting community are saying. And it was a tough thing to be hearing people and friends sort of saying, oh, they won't even get out the Solent, they'll break the boat or something will go wrong. And I know that from the letters that we got, because we had emails coming into the boat from various, notable sailors. And I know that, they were all amazed we were doing 500-mile days down through the Southern Ocean, which was, that was pushing it for anybody. And, it's obviously they do 700-mile days now, but, we're talking about 25 years ago. So it was a while ago. But yeah, it was my most frustrating campaign, because in a Whitbread or a Volvo or the ocean race, you do a leg, you have a disaster, you pull the boat together and you start afresh with the next leg. But with the Jules Verne, you break the mast, bang, that's it, it's done, end of story, go home, pick another day to do something else. And that was, it was hugely disappointing. And I watched recently the documentary that we put together, and I can relive the emotion of, oh, we didn't achieve what we set out to do, which was, it was a lot of energy had gone into that. So I did take a bit of a step sideways after that campaign and moved back to Australia and got more involved in my fitness training and in the biomechanics type stuff. But then I came up, Armour Sport was the next one after that. So I didn't I took a bit of a step back, and then the Armour Sport was the 2002, 2004 Volvo, and I got involved in that as a watch leader with Lisa. And I get, again, it feels like friends pull you on board, but it's your network. It's so important to keep the network in the industry. And I think that's what's hard at the moment with the COVID, is how do people keep that network going? It's all very well to do video conferencing, but new people into the sport, how do they get involved? How do they meet people? They can't, some of these 20-year-olds, they can't even get on boats, they can't get rides, they can't meet people in the bars. So it's quite, it's quite tough.
And let's talk about your journey through that, because, until March, you were actively doing loads of racing. I'd see you at the Maxi Worlds and at Palma Vela and all those things. You were, you had a really big campaign, and you were traveling all over the world, sailing while running your, personal training business face to face in the UK. So how have you managed to, as a professional sailor, keep it all going and survive the last 6 months?
Well, the sailing for me totally dried. Well, I think for everybody, it totally dried up. The good thing with the world as it is now is we do have the video conferencing. We have WhatsApp. We have the teams I'm on, we have WhatsApp groups, so we've kept connected and we've kept chatting. I guess the person who's out of the loop with that is the owner, because he's most of the time they're not on the groups. Which, do they want to be involved in the engagement? I mean, it is about, this COVID time has been about engagement. It's about keeping people engaged, keeping people connected, and having them not, think of what different things can I do with my time and my life. So the sailing has dried up, and I'm not part of any of the teams that have carried on going, like the Fast 40s or the TP52s or any of those things.
Yeah.
you know, and those, and even the rules that they've tried. Well, I'm on the RY Racing Committee, which is the national body of sailing, obviously in the UK, and you know, we've been involved in talking a lot about how we keep the sailing moving and how we get the, you know, how the rules are keeping the separation between crew members and that sort of thing, and it's just difficult. It's very difficult. You just got to exercise common sense. And as far as my face-to-face fitness work goes, well, that's obviously dried up as well. And I made the choice to, I've got colleagues who made the choice to try to carry on doing stuff outside. And I just made the choice to not do that because my work is much more physio orientated now as opposed to circuit training in the park. You know, it's much more using a massage bed, small movements, breaking everyday moves down, so running technique, for example, breaking that down into individual movements and then rebuilding it all. And I made the choice to do this on Zoom or on one of the video conferencing tools, and it's great. You know, I can screenshot people. I'm sitting in a place, I can see them from the same angle all the time. I can screenshot, draw all over it, pass it back to them. You know, I don't have the negative is that normally when you work with someone, you see them walk towards you as you are meeting and you can see if they're stiff or what have you. But when obviously I'm meeting, and it's like when I met you, you know, we turn the screen on and we've got each other's faces immediately. So there's pros and cons to both of them. But I think my feeling with life is that we at the moment is I'm not sitting waiting for it to go back to how it was. I don't see that happening. So I think we have to move forwards with what we've got and keep developing and try to make the most of it. And I feel lucky or glad that I am you know, on a committee that is you know, that one can influence how our sport can carry on going forwards. You know, it's a good committee now. It's full of people more my age. So we've got, you know, there's a lot of young blood and young thoughts on how we can, you know, change and work with the world and the situation that we've got. So I'm a bit of we've got what we've got, and I guess that actually is a lesson I've had from all of that ocean racing, where you're in the middle of nowhere, something goes wrong, you just can't sit there and say, well, what if this and what if that and why did that happen and poor me. You just can't do that. It's like, okay, the mast's fallen down, we got to get out of here, so let's get the bits out of the water, pull them back up, build something and move on to the next spot. And I think that's a really awesome lesson in life, especially on the boat. As you know, you only have what you've got on the boat, don't you? You can't run off to the shop and spend money. And so, you know, you've got to make do with, and you've got to use your head, keep your head calm and clear, and, you know, try to work out the plan for moving forward.
I must admit, I've definitely benefited from you not traveling all over the world and being online. When I've got to do your fitness courses, and my God, I've done a lot of Pilates and yoga. And as I said to you, the first time I did it, I was just like, okay, I'll come and do the class. And I was like, wow, it was seriously the best 40 minutes of exercise I've ever done. I know you work in high performance and you work with a lot of athletes, a lot of sailors and windsurfers and cyclists and horse riders, and it was incredible. You know, it's one of the best workouts I've ever done and continue to do. So I think credit to you for pivoting and getting online as quickly as you can to keep it all going, because actually what we'll do, we'll put the links below so people can check you out on your social media and your amazing website, because I really benefited from that. And as I said to, you know, all the people that I coach and train, check this woman out. She's amazing. And what I really like for our industry is that it's really suited to us, because so many of us, I think, rush, you know, speaking from personal experience and the people I work with, we'll get up, we'll go for a run, you know, we'll do some push-ups, we'll lift the kettlebells. And one thing I really notice in yachting, coming from a medical background, you know, in medicine, we have to do lifting courses every 3 to 6 months, and you have to be signed off on it, you know, and we have no education in sailing, you know, there's a little bit of an emphasis in the commercial sector, but as far as us private and professional high performance sailors go, there, you know, there's very little attention placed on how we lift the sails and how we move things around. And then again, like, you know, a woman's body where we have to be really careful the way we lift, because we don't have that brute strength. But even for the people with brute strength, you know, they end up the biggest injuries we see are people putting their backs out at every regatta. So, you know, I think this is a really good time for people to slow down and do workouts like you're providing, and actually get some sessions in something like biospheric performance to understand their body. So, because I think what's going to happen is, because we're not training as teams and we don't have the consistency of the regattas and the others, you know, the more fitter people in our teams motivating us, the ones that are getting up and riding in the mornings and doing their workouts, it always encourages the people, you know, that aren't that way inclined, and we're no spring chickens, you know, we are all getting older, and some people joke about, you know, that the sailing we do on the super yachts is the seniors tour, but as the seniors on the tour, we have to continue to look after our bodies. And I think in lockdown, if you haven't been, you know, disciplined and you haven't been looking after your body, and suddenly we all get back out there, say next March in the Caribbean, and start lifting the way we were a year ago, and we haven't had that consistency, we could all end up, you know, with some serious back injuries. And I'm definitely seeing in the people I speak to and my clients that people are, you know, after lockdown are going back to work and they're getting injured because they haven't been doing those simple stretches in the morning. They don't have the discipline to slow down and just, you know, just look at each muscle and how it's moving and get that core strength. So what advice could you give to all of us, to, you know, that are in the racing circuit and the ones that aren't, that are just interested in this chat? How do we look after ourselves until we go racing again? And we have to be then, you know, because when we're racing, then we're like, oh my God, that was a really tough day. I'm going to have to get some help. I'm going to have to make an effort. I'm going to have to go to the gym, but all the gyms shut, you know, and we're all left to our own and having to make use of things on Zoom. So what is your advice? How do us middle-aged sailors get ready for next season, or the one after, whenever we get to go again?
I think the biggest thing, the biggest issue with most people like us with the mindset is we want to crack into it now where we left off. And half the time our vision in our head of where we left off was actually when we were 20. So when I was 20, you know, my training was much more hardcore, as, you know, no pain, no gain, push, push, push. The next day you're sore, you know, you're doing a swim, you're doing a run, you know, it's constantly pushing, pushing, pushing
On your broken
to get fitter and
ankle.
stronger.
David
You know,
David Goggins style.
Sorry, I missed that. So again.
David Goggins style. You know, keep running, run on your broken. You've got to train. Get out there again. You know, go hard or go home.
And I was definitely one of those people. You know, from my upbringing, it was like, you know, come on, get into it. Don't complain. Don't bad workman blames his tools. All that kind of thing. And I guess I was a slight build as opposed to mesomorph, as in heavy muscled person. So I always, you know, I worked quite hard to being as strong as I could be. So as I've got older, and why I got involved in the biomechanics was because I suddenly, you know, I started getting injuries. I got a back injury in 2004 where one of my discs was disintegrating, and I was basically told, actually it was 2008, and I was basically told that I, you know, I needed to have a spine fusion. And I was like, crikey, how can I have a spine fusion? I'm doing all this racing. When am I going to have the time out? And a few years before that, I'd had issues with my knees. And I'd had a double arthroscopy in the October. And, you know, the surgeon was like, well, really, you know, you need a new knee at some stage, but we're not going to do it now. But, you know, you need to stop all this running and this height. And I was just like, oh, hang on a minute. So my journey with myself has been, I've had injuries through overuse and through bad alignment, through pushing myself hard to get to where I want to get to. So my ethos now, very much, and what I encourage people, especially through this lockdown thing, is it's not about how hard you push. It's about making sure you're in perfect alignment. You look at a lion running across the prairie, or a horse racing. You know, they don't go to the gym, they don't do press-ups and sit-ups, but they are in good alignment. They haven't sat on a sofa, they haven't laid in a spongy bed, they haven't sat over a computer where they're all hunched forward for days on end. You know, a lion, it gets its feet together, it springs open. It's all about stretch and recoil. And if we can, you know, I could show you screens of runners, of, you look at your Olympic athletes and they're tall and they run like ballroom dancers. They've got strong, straight bodies and their legs go far in front and far behind. And, you know, if we can aspire back to a more correct posture, where our head is on top of our shoulders are on top of our waist is above our feet, then when we're walking, the front of our body is stretching, the back is contracting, and so then movement becomes a lot easier. So the same with, you know, and I guess the latter part of my racing on the super yacht, what I spent most of my evenings working with the guys who were sore, and, you know, mobilizing them, massaging them, giving them exercises to do. But sailing inherently is a sport where you're sitting on a rail, hunched under the lifeline. You know, if you're the navigator, you're hunched over a computer. If you're grinding, it's all hunching forwards, and you're on an unstable platform which is rocking around. So you're on a hiding to nothing as far as pain and injury goes. So unless we can be, you know, injury free on land, how are we going to be injury free on the boat? So since April, I started up these first thing in the morning classes. You know, right when lockdown happened, I was like, oh my God, well, there's just no point getting up, really, is there? And then I thought, well, crikey, if I'm feeling like that, everybody else must be feeling like that as well. So I'm going to start a class in the morning where I get a group of people, whoever is around can join in, and we will do core stability and stretching. And the idea was to combat life in lockdown, which was this whole bent forward thing. But as time's gone by, I've realized that actually that's life. You know, everybody is over computers, working, bent forwards. So as much, you know, so anyway, basically what I would be suggesting to people is get into the core stability, get into getting these back muscles, holding your head up, pulling your chest back, you know, getting your glutes to work so that you stand straight, making sure your toes are pointing forwards, they're not standing out to the side, we're not walking off the inside of our feet. You know, we're not designed to have shoes on, so we should be able to walk barefoot, but we should be able to walk barefoot from the age of 5, not from the age of 50. Then we go barefoot, and then we have our toes pointing out and our arches are collapsing. Because the collapsing arches twist the knee, twist the hip, sort of hurts the back. You know, everything leads on to everything else. So definitely, I am and I'm a Pilates instructor as well, which is where it all started. But what I realised with Pilates was you can go and do these exercise classes once or twice a week, and then crack on back into life and still end up with an injury. So it's not about doing a class, it's about bringing those moves from the class into your everyday life, so that, you know, a certain exercise in Pilates is how to stabilize the knee, but unless you join the two together, and I think that's what I'm working really hard on doing with people, is joining the two together so they get a lasting change, because 2 classes a week is 2 hours out of 110 hours they're potentially awake. You know, if you probably do, you go for long walks, you probably do 10 or 20,000 steps a day. If you do 10 or 20 sit-ups or squats a day, or even if you did 100 squats, it's nothing in comparison to your 10,000 steps. So you need to be moving correctly in the time that you're, you know, moving. And there's a lot of people are buying home gym kits. I mean, I'm cautious of the free. I don't mind the free stuff online. I think the free stuff's great. It's stuff out there for people, but the problem with the pre-recorded stuff is that you haven't got eyes on you to watch. And I have done some pre-recorded recorded stuff, but it's so that you can go and see how to do an exercise that we've been talking about in a class, because I've broken it down as an individual exercise, and I have done some pre-recorded pole workouts which are in line with what I've done. But I would be wary of encouraging people to just go and do those classes without having done them in front of me before, because I've got TV screens all around in this room where I have my clients, and I can see what they're doing, so I correct them as we go along. And I do think exercising under the eyes of somebody who is trained to correct is a really important way to start. You wouldn't learn to sail, well, some people do, but you generally have a few lessons with something when you want to do it properly.
Yeah, I think that's something we can both agree on, that there's a lot. While there's some great free stuff out there, and there's, one thing that really gets on my nerves are all these, like, become a fitness instructor in a week for $27, buy online, and become a high performance coach for $3, and get this cornflakes packet. But anyway, we're old and stuck in our ways, and we can continue to stick to things being regulated. And I think we should all take on that advice that, is to get some eyes on you, even if it is through Zoom, to make sure. And for all of us that are moving forward, is to just get more body aware and look after these amazing vessels that will hopefully soon all be back out on the water racing together.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to wind it up there. It's been awesome to have you on the show, babe.
Oh, it's lovely to talk to you, and lovely to be able to share my learnings and thoughts. It's great.
So we're going to put your links below. I highly recommend you guys try one of Em's morning stretches. It's definitely been a total game changer for me in the last 6 months. And also the website, and it's just a really great way to stay in condition. But most of all, thanks for your inspiration. You've done loads to inspire women in sailing, and I'm a better person for having, like, the wonderful opportunity of sailing with you for many years. And I'm just so glad to have you on in my life, and especially glad to have you on the show today. So thanks, Emma Westmacott.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you. Thank you.
You're listening to Yachting International Radio. You're on Inspirations with Manda J. And see you all next time.